everybody.
Shabbat.
It's lovely to see so many people here today. It's great. It's uplifting. It's nice to have you join us. We've got some guests here. We've got a gentleman, Esteban, from Concordia, the Link magazine, Concordia magazine, who's writing an article on the current situation with COVID, the Jewish community, Hanukkah, Christmas. So it's great to welcome you. Hope you find what you're looking for here. One of my students, Vincent, all the way from Quebec City, is joining us here, studies with us, is on with us all the time. Now he gets to actually feel he sees what it looks like through the camera, but now he gets a chance to actually feel, which is great. And of course, Tyler, you read well, you did great. Your uncle, thank you for coming this morning. And all of you. You know, at the end of the day, our province is in the midst of a coronavirus wave that in many ways is, I believe, I can only talk for myself, I believe, is worse than the first wave in the spring. I'll tell you why. In the spring, the 7-day average for new cases never topped 1,000. The average. With the exception of a short-lived dip the last week of October, we've been over 1,000 new cases a day since October the 3rd. And Montreal is in the red zone. Now we're not going to go into the reasons why and how. At Maimonides, you all know that the COVID is spiraling out of control. We read the same newspapers, we speak to the same people, I speak to families. 40 residents, 22 staff tested positive. Up until last week, there were 5 deaths. That's all since the start of the second wave. So many staff members are out sick with the virus, or they're in isolation, that they don't have enough staff to take care of the residents. I've spoken to a number of family members this week who have elderly parents or loved ones there. And they tell me that they have to don full protective gear, including gowns, gloves, masks, face shields, to voluntarily help care for their loved ones. I'm sure you read in the paper of one man who, for the first time in his life, found himself helping his 92-year-old mother use the bathroom and clean her afterwards. Degrading for both, particularly for the mother. The provincial government has responded to the increase in cases with a second lockdown, which we're all getting pretty tired of. One of the things that makes the current lockdown hard to take is how incoherent the policies of the provincial government have been since we emerged from the first lockdown in the spring. Those of you who just watch the news and have to live your daily lives, it's bad enough. But for us, like Billy and myself, and those around us who have to work and keep things running with the constant updates and changes, makes it a very tiresome endeavor to try and keep going. Bars and restaurants were allowed to open, but they had to stop selling alcohol at midnight. Now, I am no doctor, but maybe somebody could explain the health rationale behind that to me. I don't understand it. Schools are known as a vector for spreading the disease. Yet when the province ordered schools open, not much was done to figure out how to do it in a safe way. I've spoken to so many teachers who are so frustrated. The latest incoherent policy, not grounded in health science, of course, is Legault's decision to allow families a 4-day window for them to gather for Christmas. They can have their Christmas meals, providing the participants quarantined before and after. And yet Jews are not given any similar kind of dispensation to allow us to gather during Hanukkah. Look what happened to the Sikh community when they were celebrating, I think it was a week and a half ago. Why shouldn't we be given equal treatment? And how should we respond to this unequal treatment? At the beginning of this week's Torah portion, Parashat Vayetze, Jacob, he's fleeing, as I told you. He's sent out of Haran, fleeing his brother's Esau's anger over the stolen blessing. And what does he do? He goes in search of a wife. He stops for the night, and as I told you the story early, he uses a stone for a pillow and has a dream of a stairway set up from the ground with its top reaching the heavens. Angels of God were going up and down the ladder. I mentioned to you that it's bizarre that they were going up and not down. The Midrash tells us that the reason the angels were first going up is that Jacob was accompanied on his journey by guardian angels. And guardian angels according to Jewish interpretation, are given one specific job to do. They're not able to do multiple jobs. And so they were accompanying him on his journey. And as he neared the border, the angels who were with him in the land of Israel were leaving, being replaced by the angels who would accompany him past the border, out, away from Eretz Yisrael, from the land of Israel. And they would accompany him on his journey outside the promised land. Why does this, and how does this connect to our situation? My friends, God gets God's work done through people. The guardian angels that we have right now, as we go through this pandemic, are the doctors and the healthcare workers, not the politicians. The doctors, the healthcare workers, and all those who are on the front line working hard to keep us all safe. Unfortunately, and until we have been vaccinated, keeping us all safe means staying at home, avoiding contact with anyone not yet in your immediate household as much as possible. The Jewish tradition teaches us pikuach nefesh docher al et hakol. Saving lives outrules or overrules every other command. The rabbis of the Talmud only made 3 exceptions. You are to sacrifice yourself rather than kill another human being. It's not permissible to engage in sexual immorality or engage in public idol worship, thus denying God. The only 3 exceptions to that. There is no religious obligation or commandment to have a Hanukkah party. And even if we did, during the pandemic, the principle of pikuach nefesh would tell us to set aside this ruling to keep ourselves healthy and safe. The Canadian Health Authority has a clear message on its website. The safest way to celebrate or enjoy the holidays is with members of your immediate household, meaning anyone who shares the same living space and nobody else. News outlets, if you watch news outlets across America, which is something that I do, they're warning our neighbors to the south to learn the lesson from Canada. Newspaper articles from Seattle to Washington, D.C. ask, will the U.S. heed Canada's Thanksgiving lesson? The article points to how a spike in COVID cases after families gathered for Thanksgiving meals in Canada in October could be a predictor for what will happen after the American Thanksgiving, which was celebrated just a few days ago. A few super spreader events in Canada, where over a dozen people became sick after sharing a Thanksgiving meal, are offered as a cautionary tale. Here in Canada, we should be asking whether we are heeding our own Thanksgiving lesson. Doctors give the province's plan for allowing Christmas gatherings mixed reviews. Some say, you know what, people are going to gather anyway. Better they have some guidelines to try and make it a little bit safer. I didn't hear that about Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Or Pesach. Or Rosh Hashanah. Interesting. Dr. Andrew Morris, a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto, said about the plan. To me, he says, it sends confusing messaging to people. And I'm not sure it's going to make people less likely to gather before that date or after. We know that COVID can have an incubation period of longer than 7 days. We know that people who have no symptoms can be infected and can be very effective transmitters of the disease. We know that being indoors, not wearing a mask, and longer exposure times all make it likelier to spread the disease. And those are all features of an indoor family gathering over a leisurely holiday meal. And we also know that many, many people would hear the part about it's okay to have a Christmas dinner with your extended family, but they won't pay attention to the other part, the part about quarantine. Allowing families to gather for Christmas not only endangers those attending those gatherings, it endangers all of us. The more people in the community who are infected, the likelier it is that people we come into contact with, the grocery store, the doctor's office, the dentist's office, may also be infected. People who claim that they should be able to go to gatherings, whether it's Hanukkah, whether it's Christmas, Diwali, whatever, if they want to, because if they want to go, they are only endangering, they're not only endangering themselves. What they do is they fail to see how we're all in this together. You know, it reminds me when I hear this of the story of the guy who was a passenger in a wooden boat who pulls out a drill and starts drilling a hole in the bottom of the boat under his seat. And other passengers yell at him, hey, what the heck are you doing? What do you think you're doing? And he replies, what the heck do you care? It's only under my seat. That is exactly what people are doing who go to these events. We're all tired of lockdowns. We're all tired of COVID. We're all tired of the restrictions. But, and I know we all long to spend time with our loved ones, to see children, to see grandchildren, siblings, nephews, nieces, and friends. I get it. But this is not the time to give up. There's a lot of good news coming out. There are 3 vaccines. I know one yesterday they said wasn't as good as they thought it was going to be. Work on it a little bit more. But they're large-scale clinical trials. Within a few months, large-scale vaccination efforts will be underway. We have guardian angels. They are the medical professionals. They're studying COVID, treating people who have been infected, developing vaccines. Our community has a very high percentage of people in a high-risk group, either because of pre-existing conditions or because of being over the age of 65. Lobbying to allow family gatherings is not going to protect the vulnerable members of our community. So let's ask that question again. The question is, why don't Jews get the same freedom to have family gatherings? Now, I hate to be cynical. I hate to be skeptical. I grew up in a Church of England country. Okay? Jews in that country were the minority. I think when I lived in England, when I grew up, I think there was something like, I don't know, 40 million people in the country. The Jewish community at its greatest, at its largest, was 200,000. Do the math. Nobody ever queried or questioned the government when it came to things like Christmas or Easter. It was a given. Church of England country. The Queen was in charge of the church. I mean, we did our thing, they did their thing. It was hey, fine. But here it's very different. Why is it different? Even though the numbers are almost the same. 8 million people in Quebec, approximately, give or take. How many Jews we got here? About 80,000, something like that. Do the numbers. So of course, our politicians are going to focus on what? Pardon?
The majority.
The majority, exactly. Is it right? Is it wrong? No. The majority. Why? Because they want to get re-elected.
Thank God for the states.
Right. So the point here is, we shouldn't be relying on our politicians to give us medical advice. We should be listening to our doctors. Okay? I understand what the politicians are doing. I understand where it goes. Our politicians cannot be sending and must not be sending mixed messages. They cannot be giving one group preferential treatment, not in a case like this. This is a time where all of us are affected. So if they give one group the permission to gather, they're actually creating a health hazard for all the other groups as well. It's not about we want equal time gathering, because that is wrong. That is against the Torah, it's against the Talmud, it's against everything for us to do that. So the question that we should be asking is not why don't Jews get the same freedom to have a family gathering for the holidays that Christians have? The question we should be asking is why is the government condoning anyone getting together indoors without masks at a time when the virus is spreading rapidly throughout the community? That's the question. And that is the question that each and every one of us should be firing off to our politicians and holding their toes to the fire. Shabbat shalom.